darkness grows stronger with each new soul that joins us. Today, we've reached 8,000 subscribers on Void of Fears. Only 2,000 more until we reach our goal of 10,000. Thank you for embracing the shadows with me. Every like, every subscription, they're more than numbers. They're connections that strengthen what we're building here. Your support means everything. I'm truly so grateful. Now let's dive into today's story. The viewport of the Artemis revealed Kepler 438b in all its haunting beauty, an azure and rust-coloured orb suspended against the black void. Dr. Eliza Wright pressed her palm against the reinforced glass, the cold seeping into her skin as she studied what might be humanity's greatest discovery. After 5 years in cryosleep and decades of planning, they had arrived at the first confirmed site of extraterrestrial civilization. Quite a sight, isn't it? Captain Julian Reeves joined her at the viewport, his weathered face reflecting the alien world's glow. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp, his posture still military straight despite 15 years in the private sector. "It doesn't seem real," Eliza replied, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "My entire career has led to this moment." At 38, she was the youngest xenoarchaeologist to lead an interstellar expedition, her reputation built on controversial theories about non-terrestrial intelligence that had finally been vindicated. Reeves nodded. "The preliminary scans are complete. Those structures we detected from Earth are definitely artificial and massive. Whatever built them was advanced." "Whoever," Eliza corrected, "not whatever." "Right?" Reeves didn't sound convinced. His eyes, the pale blue of Arctic ice, narrowed slightly. "You've always been certain, haven't you? Even when everyone said you were chasing fantasies." "Science isn't about certainty, Captain. It's about following evidence where it leads." She turned back to the viewport. "And now we're about to make history." "Briefing in 10 minutes, Reeves said, checking his wrist display. "We start atmospheric entry procedures after that." As he walked away, Eliza remained transfixed by the planet. Its dual moons hung like sentinels in the distance, one pale blue, the other a sickly yellow. Something about their positioning seemed deliberate, as though they had been placed rather than formed naturally. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The ship's intercom crackled. "All research personnel reported to the command deck. Prepare for mission briefing." Eliza took one last look at their destination. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow pass across the planet's surface, something vast and circular, like an eclipse. She blinked, and it was gone. In the briefing room, 8 specialists gathered around the holographic display showing detailed scans of their landing zone. Dr. Maya Patel, the medical officer, was reviewing biological containment protocols with meticulous attention. Thomas Wayland, their engineer, adjusted 3-dimensional renderings of the massive structures they'd detected from orbit. "The landing zone has been selected for optimal proximity to the primary site while maintaining a safety buffer," Reeves explained, highlighting a flat plain 47 kilometers from the alien structures. "Atmospheric composition is breathable, but contains trace elements we haven't fully analyzed. Full enviro suits for the first 48 hours. "Will that be enough time for comprehensive analysis?" Dr. Naomi Ellis, their linguist, asked. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table, betraying her excitement. "If there are artifacts with writing..." "We have 6 months of mission time, Dr. Ellis," Reeves reminded her. "Let's not rush into potential contamination." Dr. Victor Cato, the expedition's biologist, cleared his throat. "My primary concern is unknown biological agents. Even if the builders are long gone, microorganisms could persist." "All samples will be subject to level 4 containment protocols," Maya assured him. "Nothing gets analysed outside the sealed lab until we've established safety parameters." Marcus Dalton, head of security, stood with arms crossed at the room's perimeter. His eyes constantly scanned the group, assessing. What about defensive measures? We're assuming this civilization is extinct, but assumptions get people killed. The structures show no energy signatures consistent with active technology, Leeway, their physicist, countered. Our scans indicate they've been abandoned for millions of years. Appearances can be deceiving, Marcus replied flatly. Dr. Richard Avery, their AI specialist, looked up from his tablet. One curious note, our long-range scans detected intermittent electromagnetic fluctuations near the central structures. Could be natural phenomena, but the patterns show unusual regularity. Another reason for our cautious approach, Reeves concluded. We land at 8 a.m. Prepare your equipment and get some rest. History awaits us tomorrow. As the team dispersed, Eliza lingered, studying the holographic model of the alien city. The structures followed patterns that seemed almost familiar, concentric rings surrounding a central spire that reached impossibly high. Something about the design triggered recognition in her mind, like a word on the tip of her tongue. "Thinking about your vindication speech?" Thomas asked with a grin, joining her at the display. Eliza smiled despite herself. "I'm thinking this is bigger than vindication. Look at the precision of these alignments." She highlighted several of the larger structures. They're positioned in relation to astronomical coordinates. This wasn't just a city, it was an instrument. An instrument for what? That, Eliza said, is what we're going to find out. The landing module touched down on a vast plain of rust-coloured soil, kicking up dust that hung unnaturally long in the air before settling. Eliza was the third to step onto the alien world, her boots sinking slightly into the powdery surface. The air, deemed breathable after extensive testing, filled her lungs with a strange metallic taste that made her tongue tingle. "Everyone feeling okay?" Dr. Maya Patel scanned each crew member with her diagnostic tool. Her dark eyes were visible through her partially transparent visor, watching carefully for any adverse reactions. "Gravity is about 1.2 times Earth standard. You'll feel slightly heavier, but nothing your bodies can't adjust to." Eliza barely heard her, her attention fixed on the horizon where massive stone spires jutted against the reddish sky. What they had detected from orbit was now unmistakable, a city of impossible proportions, built by hands that were not human. She activated her recorder. Initial surface observation of Kepler 438b. The suspected artificial structures are visible from our landing zone, approximately 50 kilometers distant. Scale is difficult to process. The largest spires must be at least 2 kilometers high. Distance to the primary site is approximately 47 kilometers, announced Leeway, checking his instruments. Ground transport will get us there in 3 days, accounting for terrain challenges. "I still don't understand why we didn't land closer," complained Marcus, the security officer, his hand never straying far from his sidearm. "The electromagnetic disturbances intensify near the structures," Naomi explained, already recording the whispering wind with directional microphones. "Anything closer and our systems might have failed during descent." "We'll set up base camp here," Captain Reeves decided. "Dr. Wright, coordinate with Dr. Patel on environmental safety protocols. Lee, get the ground transport prepped. We move out at dawn." The alien sunset transformed the landscape into a canvas of deep crimsons and purples. As darkness fell, unfamiliar stars emerged in patterns that no human had ever witnessed directly. The team established perimeter sensors and retreated to the habitat modules, but Eliza found sleep elusive. She stepped outside, sealed in her environmental suit despite the all-clear from Maya's tests. The night air was cool against her face as she removed her helmet, the taste of metal stronger now. The moons cast contradictory shadows, one sharp and blue-tinged, the other diffuse and yellowish. "You should be resting," Captain Reeves said, approaching from the habitat. "Tomorrow will be demanding." "Hard to sleep when you're making the greatest discovery in human history," Eliza replied, her eyes still on the moons. Have you noticed how they never change position relative to each other? That's astronomically improbable. Reeves followed her gaze. Maybe they're tidally locked in some complex way. Or maybe they were moved, Eliza suggested, by the same beings who built the city. A civilization capable of building structures that survive millions of years might consider planetary engineering a reasonable project. Reeves was silent for a long moment. Do you ever consider that some discoveries might be too big for us? That we might not be ready? The question surprised her. Science doesn't wait for readiness, Captain. Knowledge isn't dangerous. Ignorance is. I used to believe that, he said quietly. Get some sleep, Doctor. Dawn comes early here. That night, beneath alien stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations, Eliza dreamed of vast chambers filled with shadows that moved against the light. She woke with the distinct feeling that someone had been whispering in her ear, though the words remained just beyond comprehension. In her journal, she wrote, "First night on Kepler 438b. Dreams unusually vivid. Several crew members report similar experiences. The city calls to us. The journey across the planet's surface revealed an increasingly bizarre landscape. What had appeared barren from a distance sprouted life forms unlike anything in Earth's biological catalogue. Plant-like organisms tracked their movement, swiveling what resembled sensory organs to follow the ground transport's progress. These can't have evolved naturally," muttered Dr. Kato, collecting samples with gloved hands. The biologist's typically calm demeanour had given way to childlike excitement. The symmetry is too perfect, almost like they were designed. The vegetation increased in density and strangeness as they approached the city. Vine-like growths formed perfect hexagonal patterns across the ground. Bulbous pods hung from spindly stalks, contracting rhythmically as if breathing. "They're responding to our presence," Kato observed, recording a cluster of frond-like structures that bent towards their vehicle. "Look at the reaction time. It's almost instantaneous." By the second day, they discovered the first definitive evidence of the former inhabitants, a fossilized skeletal fragment protruding from an eroded bank. The creature had been humanoid, but with significant anatomical differences: elongated limbs, an oversized cranial structure, and what appeared to be additional joint articulations. "Fascinating," Carter whispered, carefully extracting the fragment. "The bone density suggests they evolved in higher gravity than what we're experiencing now." "Which makes no sense," Lee added, scanning the fragment with his portable analyzer, "unless the planet's mass has somehow decreased over time." "Or they weren't native to this world," Eliza suggested. "Maybe they came here, just like we did." That evening, Naomi developed a splitting headache after spending hours studying symbols carved into stone markers they'd encountered along their route. The markings resembled constellations, but arranged in patterns that didn't match the current sky. "They keep shifting when I look away," she complained as Maya administered pain medication, "like they're trying to rearrange themselves into something meaningful." "Visual hallucinations are consistent with mild psychotropic exposure," Maya noted, examining Naomi's pupils. "The atmosphere might contain compounds affecting neuroreception. Everyone should increase fluid intake to help process potential toxins." Marcus, who had been unusually quiet during their journey, finally spoke up during the evening meal. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" His hand rested on his weapon, eyes scanning the darkening horizon. "Scanners show nothing, but I can't shake the feeling." No one answered, but Eliza noticed the uncomfortable glances exchanged among the crew. She felt it too, a presence just beyond perception studying them with ancient patience. That night the dreams intensified. Eliza found herself walking through corridors that twisted in non-Euclidean angles, pursued by elongated shadows that whispered in voices like rustling paper. She woke gasping, her skin slick with sweat despite the habitat's carefully regulated temperature. A quick check of the medical logs revealed she wasn't alone. 6 of the 8 crew members had experienced elevated heart rates and stress markers during sleep. Only Captain Reeves and Marcus showed normal patterns. Second night, she wrote in her journal, dreams more intense, consistent imagery across multiple crew members, shadowed figures, architectural spaces, whispered communications, shared hallucination, or something else. On the morning of the 3rd day, they crested a final ridge and beheld the city in its entirety. The scale defied comprehension, a vast complex of black spires, domes, and interconnected structures that covered an area comparable to Earth's largest metropolises. The design followed the concentric pattern they'd observed from orbit, everything oriented towards a central building that resembled an astronomical observatory. "My God," Thomas whispered. The normally talkative engineer rendered speechless. "We're looking at the greatest architectural achievement in known history," Eliza said, her voice steady despite the awe she felt, "and we're going to be the first humans to step inside." On the 3rd day, they reached the city's outskirts. Up close, the scale was mind-numbing. Walls of black stone rose hundreds of meters high, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of one's eye. The material wasn't basalt or obsidian, as they had initially theorized, but something unknown to Earth geology, a substance that absorbed light rather than reflected it. "It's older than human civilization," Eliza breathed, running her scanner over the wall's surface. "Possibly millions of years. Yet the structural integrity is perfect. No erosion, no weathering. Preliminary dating puts it at approximately 3.6 million years, Lee confirmed, studying his readings with a furrowed brow. But the margin of error is unusually high. Something about the material interferes with standard dating techniques." They followed the wall until they discovered what appeared to be a main entrance. A massive archway carved with a central symbol resembling a sun, though the design seemed to draw light inward rather than emit it. The doors themselves, massive slabs of the same black material, were sealed but showed evidence of mechanisms still intact. "There's power flowing through the structure," Lee announced in disbelief, his instruments detecting faint electromagnetic pulses. After all this time, something's still operating. What kind of power source could last millions of years? Thomas wondered, already trying to access the door's inner workings with his equipment. "Nothing in our current technological understanding," Lee admitted. "Even our most advanced nuclear isotopes would have decayed to inert material." It took several hours of careful examination before they located what might be an opening mechanism, a recessed panel with indentations that matched the dimensions of a human hand, though elongated and with spaces for what appeared to be additional digits. "It can't be this simple," Eliza murmured, as she placed her hand into the depression, stretching her fingers to cover as much of the pattern as possible. "Wait," Maya cautioned. "We should analyze for biohazards before direct contact." "Already done," Eliza replied, her scientific caution momentarily overcome by the prospect of discovery. "No detectable pathogens or toxins." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low humming vibrated through the stone, and hairline cracks appeared along the seam of the massive doors. The team stepped back as ancient machinery groaned to life, and the entrance began to part. As the dark gap widened, their recording equipment captured a sound that chilled them all. Whispers in an unknown language, emanating from the darkness within, though no life signs registered on their scanners. Dr. Avery, their AI specialist, frowned at his tablet. "That's not possible," he muttered, tapping commands frantically. "My system just displayed code I didn't program, symbols that match the ones on the door." "Welcome message," Lee suggested weakly. "Or a warning," Marcus countered, activating the lights on his tactical gear. The doors finished their ponderous opening, revealing a corridor that descended into darkness, walls lined with the same light-absorbing material. The air that rushed out was stale but breathable, carrying the scent of ozone and something else, an organic smell reminiscent of copper and salt. "We make camp here tonight," Captain Reeves decided. "No one enters until morning, and we go in as a full team. Dr. Wright, your preliminary assessment?" Eliza stared into the darkness, feeling it stare back. Whatever civilization built this, they were far more advanced than we are now, and I don't think they're as gone as we assumed. "Based on what evidence?" Reeves asked, his voice carefully neutral. "The active power systems, the pristine condition, the electromagnetic anomalies." She hesitated, then added, "And the dreams we've all been having since we landed. I think they've been expecting us." The night passed uneasily. The camp set up within sight of the open doorway. Eliza noticed that no one positioned their sleeping area with their back to the entrance, as if none wanted to be unaware of what might emerge from the darkness. Naomi spent the evening attempting to decipher the symbols around the doorway, muttering to herself as she compared patterns to star charts and linguistic structures. "It's not just a language," she explained when Eliza inquired. "It's a multi-dimensional system of communication. The same symbol can mean different things, depending on the angle of observation and the position of the viewer." "That doesn't sound like a written language," Eliza noted. "It's not, at least not by our definition." Naomi's eyes were bright with the thrill of discovery despite her lingering headache. "It's more like programming reality itself." During his watch, Marcus reported a strange occurrence: momentary power fluctuations throughout their equipment, coinciding with what he described as movement at the threshold of the doorway. "Nothing concrete on the scanners," he admitted, "just shadows shifting in ways that shadows shouldn't." Eliza reviewed the security footage the next morning and saw nothing unusual, just the dark entrance and the occasional play of their camp's lights against the walls. But something about the emptiness felt deliberate, as if something had carefully stepped around the camera's field of view. Morning brought no sun, only a gradual lightening of the rust-coloured sky as they prepared to enter the alien city. Their equipment had malfunctioned intermittently overnight, communications with the orbiting Artemis becoming increasingly distorted. "Interference increases the closer we get to the central structures," Lee explained, attempting to calibrate their comms. "Something about the material disrupts standard frequencies." Captain Reeves addressed the team before entry, his face grave. "We maintain communication at all times. Standard exploration protocols apply. No one touches anything without clearance, no one separates from the group. At the first sign of danger, we retreat to the camp." Questions? What constitutes danger in an alien city that's been abandoned for millions of years? Thomas asked, half joking. "Use your judgment," Reeves replied without humour. "But if you feel something's wrong, don't second-guess yourself. Better to be cautious than curious." They entered in formation, Marcus taking point, followed by Reeves, then the scientific team, with Maya and another security officer bringing up the rear. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor far larger than human architecture would dictate. The ceiling soared at least 10 meters above them, the passage wide enough for 20 people to walk abreast. The first chamber beyond the entrance stretched their sense of scale and possibility. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters overhead, supported by columns wider than Earth's largest redwoods. The entire space was illuminated by a diffuse light with no discernible source, creating shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. "The architecture violates several principles of structural engineering," Lee whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally. "These spans shouldn't be able to support themselves without collapsing." Naomi ran her fingers over inscriptions that covered the columns, her touch light as if afraid they might react. "The language changes as we move deeper. These symbols are more urgent than those outside." Can you translate any of it? Reeves asked. Fragments. There are recurring patterns that might relate to astronomical cycles, and something about return or awakening. As they progressed deeper, the violations of natural law became more pronounced. In certain chambers, gravity itself seemed altered. Water in ancient channels flowing upward, objects drifting when placed on seemingly level surfaces. The team documented everything meticulously, though their equipment continued to behave erratically. These anomalies aren't random, Lee observed, after mapping several affected zones. They follow patterns corresponding to the symbols Naomi's been studying. It's as if the writing itself is influencing physical laws. That's not possible, Richard objected. Language can describe reality, not alter it. Our language, perhaps, Eliza suggested. But we're dealing with a civilization millions of years more advanced than ours. What if they developed a way to encode physical laws into symbolic representation? By midday, they had reached what appeared to be a central plaza, dominated by a massive astronomical device. Concentric rings of the black material suspended in air, without visible support, slowly rotating around a central axis aimed at the sky. It's tracking something, Avery noted, studying the device's movement. The rotation corresponds to a point in space that's currently not visible from this hemisphere. Along one wall of the plaza stretched an elaborate mural depicting the planet's system. At its center was the host star, surrounded by orbiting worlds, including their current location. But beyond the system's edge, approached a black circle that seemed to consume everything in its path. Stars, planets, even light itself. Translation is preliminary, Naomi said, studying the inscriptions beneath the mural, but this appears to depict a recurring celestial event, something they called the Devourer that passes through this system on a regular cycle. Like a comet, Maya suggested. Naomi shook her head. Much larger, and the timescale is vast, thousands of years between appearances. Could it be a rogue planet? Lee suggested. A massive object with a highly elliptical orbit. That wouldn't explain the light absorption properties depicted here, Richard countered, highlighting details in the mural where stars disappeared behind the black circle. As they studied the mural, Thomas, their engineer, wandered to the far side of the plaza, where a series of control panels still hummed with power. His curiosity overrode caution as he passed his scanner over the alien interface. The scream that erupted from him sent the team rushing to his position. They found Thomas rigid, eyes wide with terror, hands clutching his head. "They're here," he gasped when Maya reached him. "They're all around us. I saw them, watching from the shadows." "There's nothing there," Maya soothed, administering a mild sedative. "Your brain activity is spiking off the charts. Some kind of hallucination." "Not a hallucination," Thomas insisted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They built this place to survive. They're waiting for it to return." "For what to return?" Eliza asked, kneeling beside him. Thomas pointed a trembling finger toward the mural of the black circle. "The black sun, it's coming back. And they need us to be ready." His eyes rolled back and he collapsed into unconsciousness. Maya's diagnostic tools showed chaotic brain activity unlike anything in medical records. "We need to get him back to the camp," she decided. "His neural patterns are destabilizing." "I'll take him," Marcus volunteered, already lifting the engineer's limp form. "The rest of you should continue. We've come too far to turn back now." Captain Reeves hesitated, clearly torn between continuing the exploration and ensuring his crew's safety. "Dr. Patel, you go with them, monitor his condition, and report any changes immediately." "Sir," Maya objected, "with all due respect, separating the team further isn't wise." "We stay in communication," Reeves insisted, "and no one else touches any controls or interfaces. We observe only until we understand what happened to Thomas." As Marcus and Maya carried Thomas back toward the entrance, Eliza approached the control panel that had triggered his episode. Despite the captain's warning, She scanned it from a safe distance, recording the symbols and energy patterns. "There's a neural interface component," she reported. "It responded to his proximity, not his touch. These beings communicated with their technology through thought." "Which explains the reaction," Richard surmised. "A human brain trying to process alien thought patterns would experience something like a seizure." "Or maybe it showed him something real," Naomi suggested quietly. "Something we can't see yet." After Thomas was safely returned to the camp, the remaining team members continued their exploration with heightened caution. The city's layout became clearer, concentric rings of structures surrounding a central temple complex. Every building, every corridor seemed designed to channel movement toward this center. "It's like a massive circuit," Lee observed, mapping their progress, "or a lens focusing energy toward the central point." The temple itself differed from the surrounding structures. While the city was built of the light-absorbing black material, the temple incorporated crystalline elements that refracted light in impossible patterns, creating rainbows that moved against the direction of the team's light sources. This was their most sacred space, Naomi surmised, carefully documenting the symbols that covered every surface. The inscriptions speak of transformation and rebirth. Within the central chamber, they discovered an altar-like structure surrounded by channels containing a silvery liquid that moved with apparent sentience, forming patterns before dissolving back into formless pools. "Don't touch it," Maya warned. When Lee reached towards the substance, "We have no idea what it could do to human tissue." "It's responding to our presence," Lee noted, observing how the liquid formed more complex patterns when they approached, almost like it's trying to communicate. As they examined the chamber, Captain Reeves noticed a seam in the floor beneath the altar. "There's something underneath, a hidden level." It took hours of careful investigation before they discovered the mechanism to open the floor. A sequence of pressure points around the altar's base. With a sound like a last breath being exhaled, the floor split open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "We should wait until Thomas recovers," Richard suggested. "Going down with reduced numbers isn't safe." "We can't waste time," Eliza countered, already preparing her equipment. "If there are answers about this civilization, they'll be down there." The captain made the final decision. "Dr. Wright, Dr. Patel, Lee, and I will explore the lower level. The rest of you maintain position here and continue analyzing what we've found. Keep comms open as long as possible." Before descending, Eliza contacted Maya at the camp. "How's Thomas?" "Stable but still unconscious," Maya replied, her voice distorted by interference. "His brain activity has normalized somewhat, but he's experiencing REM sleep patterns even while unconscious. Whatever he saw is still processing in his mind." "Any coherent statements before he lost consciousness?" "He kept repeating something about the Watchers and the between space, and he mentioned a name, Azathoth or something similar. Does that mean anything to you?" The name sent a chill through Eliza, though she couldn't explain why. "Nothing specific. Keep monitoring him. We're heading to a lower level of the complex." "Be careful, Eliza. Something about this place isn't right. The biological samples we've collected are showing signs of alteration." "What kind of alteration?" "Cellular reconfiguration, as if they're being rewritten at a fundamental level. I've isolated them in containment, but the process continues regardless of environment." Eliza shared this information with the others as they prepared to descend. Captain Reeves's expression darkened further. "Last chance to postpone this exploration," he offered. "We need answers," Eliza insisted, "and they're down there." The descent took them hundreds of meters below the city, the air growing noticeably cooler and heavier with strange scents. Unlike the upper levels, the subterranean complex showed signs of advanced technology. Metal alloys unknown to Earth science lined the walls, pulsing occasionally with subdued light. This wasn't meant for visitors to see, Eliza realized. documenting everything with her recorder. This was their actual living space. The city above was ceremonial. Or a facade, Lee suggested. A public face hiding their true activities. They passed through laboratories containing equipment that defied understanding, devices that manipulated matter in ways human science had only theorized. In one chamber, they discovered preservation pods containing the remains of the planet's former inhabitants. Extraordinary, Lee whispered, examining the preserved specimens. Humanoid, but with significant adaptations for higher cognitive function. Their brains are nearly twice the size of ours, with additional lobes where we have none. The cranial structure matches the fossil fragments we found, Eliza noted, but these specimens show evolutionary developments beyond what we observed there, as if they continued to change themselves over time. Most shocking was a vast chamber filled with thousands of suspension pods, many still functioning despite the passage of time. The pods were empty, but showed signs of previous use. Settings configured for different physiologies, monitoring systems still active. They were preparing for something, Captain Reeves observed, studying the facility. Mass preservation, but for what purpose? A cataclysm, Lee suggested. Perhaps they detected the approach of this black sun and created this as a shelter. But where are they now? Eliza wondered. If they survived in these pods, why abandon them? Their exploration eventually led them to what appeared to be an archive, a circular room whose walls were lined with storage devices reminiscent of advanced computers. At the center stood a control interface that activated their approach, holographic displays flickering to life, with symbols similar to those Naomi had been studying. "This is incredible," Eliza breathed, approaching the interface, their knowledge base preserved for millennia. Lee carefully examined the technology. Power sources unknown, but still functioning at near-optimal levels, if we can interface with our systems. Hours passed as they worked to establish a connection between their equipment and the alien technology. Naomi consulted via comms, provided translation assistance until they achieved a breakthrough. The alien system began converting its data into formats their computers could partially interpret. They called themselves the Watchers, Naomi announced, her voice crackling through the increasingly unstable comms link. They were astronomers and scientists who discovered something approaching their system, a cosmic phenomenon they couldn't fully explain. The data revealed fragments of the civilization's final years, records of astronomical research and desperate preparations. The Watchers had discovered an object they called the Devourer, or Black Sun, a massive celestial body that passed through their system every 12,000 years, causing devastation beyond comprehension. Not destruction, Eliza corrected as more translations came through. Transformation. They didn't fear it would destroy them. They believed it would change them into something else. Like a planetary mass extinction event, Lee suggested. More fundamental than that, the records speak of transcending physical limitations and evolving beyond material constraints. They saw this as an opportunity, not a disaster. The final records described a mass evacuation, though not to space or other worlds as the team had initially assumed. The language became increasingly metaphysical, describing plans to transcend physical limitations and awaken in the between space after the Black Sun's passing. They were planning to return, Eliza realized, the implications sending chills through her body. This entire city is some kind of waiting room. Return from where? Captain Reeves demanded, his usually steady voice tense. Another dimension, perhaps, Lee suggested, if the Black Sun creates conditions that allow for interdimensional transfer. That's not science, Reeves objected. That's fantasy. By our current understanding, perhaps, Eliza countered. But we're dealing with a civilization millions of years more advanced than ours. Their reality might include concepts we haven't even begun to theorize. Their exploration led them to one final chamber that appeared to be the civilization's main observatory. At its center stood a massive telescope, still aimed at a specific point in space. The walls were covered with star charts depicting the system's configuration over thousands of years, tracking the approach of the Black Sun. With Richard's remote assistance, they activated the observatory's ancient computer systems. A holographic display materialized, showing a timeline of the Black Sun's movements, its last appearance, the Watcher's preparation, and its projected return. The date of the next arrival corresponded to the present day. "This can't be coincidence," Captain Reeves stated, his voice tight with controlled alarm. "Our arrival exactly when this phenomenon returns. The odds are astronomical." "Unless we were meant to be here," Eliza whispered, the pieces falling into place. "Unless something wanted us here at precisely this time." The comms crackled with Marcus's voice from above, panic evident in his tone. "Captain, we've lost contact with the ship, and there's something happening in the sky. A shadow growing larger. You need to see this." When they emerged from the underground complex, the world had changed. The reddish sky had darkened to a deep crimson, and hanging above the horizon was a perfect circle of absolute blackness, not merely blocking the light behind it, but seeming to draw all illumination toward its center. The Black Sun had returned. "It doesn't make sense," Richard muttered, his instruments going haywire as he attempted to analyze the phenomenon. "It's not a conventional black hole. It's as if reality itself is being bent around it." Communications with the orbiting ship remained severed, leaving them isolated on the surface. More disturbing were the changes occurring throughout the city. Structures reconfiguring themselves, dormant systems activating, the black material beginning to pulse with energy that hadn't been present before. "The entire complex is waking up," Lee observed, scanning the increasingly active systems. "Power levels are rising exponentially." Thomas had regained consciousness but remained disoriented, his eyes constantly darting to empty corners of the room, as if tracking movement only he could see. "They're coming back," he whispered when Eliza approached him. "I saw them in the between space. They've been waiting so long." "Who has, Thomas? The Watchers?" He nodded, his expression haunted. "They need vessels, physical forms to return to this reality. That's why we're here." "That's the sedatives talking," Meyer insisted, checking his vitals. "Your brain chemistry is still adapting to whatever that interface did to you." "It showed me the truth," Thomas insisted, gripping Eliza's wrist with surprising strength. "They've been watching us for centuries, calling to us, the dreams, the whispers. It's all been preparation." Captain Reeves ordered an immediate evacuation. "Pack essential equipment only. We're returning to the landing site and establishing communication with the ship." "We can't leave," Eliza objected. "Not when we're on the verge of contact with another intelligent species." "That's precisely why we're leaving," Reeves countered. "This mission was for observation and analysis, not first contact with an unknown intelligence." As they prepared to depart, Naomi approached Eliza, her expression troubled. "I've completed more translations from the temple inscriptions. The Black Sun isn't just a celestial body. It's a gateway. The Watchers believed it would allow them to evolve beyond physical form." "Into what?" "Something transcendent, beyond our understanding of existence." She hesitated. "But there's something else. The final inscriptions contain a warning. Not everyone survived the transition. Many were lost in the between space, unable to return when the Black Sun passed." That night, the phenomena intensified. Multiple crew members reported seeing figures in their peripheral vision, tall, elongated shapes that vanished when directly observed. Maya discovered during medical scans that the crew's neural patterns were gradually synchronizing, their brainwaves falling into matching frequencies. "It's like our minds are being tuned to the same channel," she explained, showing Eliza the readings. I've never seen anything like it. Most alarming were the marks appearing on their skin, bruise-like patterns resembling the symbols found throughout the city, fading and reappearing in different configurations. It's not physical, Maya explained, examining a pattern on Eliza's forearm. The skin itself is unchanged. It's as if our perception is being altered to see these marks. Sleep brought vivid, shared dreams to all of them. Visions of the city in its prime, filled with the tall, elegant forms of the Watchers. In these dreams, they witnessed the civilization's final days as they prepared for the Black Sun's arrival, entering their suspension chambers as the sky darkened with the approach of the Great Void. Eliza woke gasping, fragments of alien memories clinging to her consciousness. Outside their camp, the city blazed with awakened power, the central spire now emitting a column of darkness that connected to the Black Sun overhead. "We need to understand what's happening," she insisted when the team gathered for an emergency meeting. "Running away won't help if this phenomenon affects the entire planet." "Our priority is survival," Captain Reeves maintained. "We've lost contact with the ship and something is clearly influencing our minds. We need distance from the city." "I disagree," Thomas said, his voice stronger than it had been since his collapse. "We were brought here for a reason. The Watchers need us." "Need us for what?" Marcus demanded, his hand resting on his weapon. "To complete the cycle," Thomas replied, his eyes reflecting the pulsing light of the city, "to provide the vessels they require to return." As the Black Sun grew larger in the sky, Naomi made a breakthrough in translating the final records of the Watchers. What they discovered shattered their understanding of their mission. "They didn't leave," she explained, her voice hollow with shock. "The Watchers discovered a way to survive by transferring their consciousness into another dimension, a space between spaces. The Black Sun doesn't destroy, it creates a temporary bridge between realities." The city, Eliza realized, it's not a commemoration, it's a conversion device, a massive machine, designed to facilitate their return when the Black Sun reappears. "But why bring us here?" Marcus demanded, his composure cracking. "What do they want with humans?" "Exactly what Thomas said," Eliza answered quietly. "Vessels. Their physical forms couldn't survive the transition. They needed new bodies to inhabit when the Black Sun returns." The answer came that night in Eliza's dreams, vivid visions of the Watchers' final days. She saw their civilization preparing for transcendence, entering suspended animation as the Black Sun approached. Their bodies were left behind as their consciousness transferred to the other dimension. But something went wrong. The bridge collapsed too quickly, leaving them stranded between worlds, unable to return when the Black Sun passed. For 12 millennia, they had waited, bodiless, in the space between dimensions, and now they needed vessels to return. Eliza woke, gasping, the realization terrible in its clarity. "They need our bodies," she told the others when they gathered at dawn. "The dreams, the hallucinations, they've been testing us, preparing our minds to receive them." Maya confirmed her suspicions with a shocking discovery. "I found foreign DNA in our blood samples, fragments of genetic code that match what we found in the preserved specimens. It's as if we're being gradually rewritten at a cellular level." "We need to leave," Captain Reeves decided. "Full evacuation immediately." But when they attempted to return to their landing site, they discovered the city had sealed itself. Massive walls had risen from the ground, encircling the entire complex. The ground transport vehicles were crushed beneath tons of the black material. "They're not letting us go," Marcus stated, checking his weapon, "which means we fight our way out." "Fight what?" Lee asked. "We haven't seen any physical entities to engage." Desperate attempts to contact the orbiting ship revealed a terrifying truth. The crew aboard the Artemis reported seeing the same phenomenon in space. The Black Sun was visible from orbit, affecting electronic systems and causing unexplained physical symptoms identical to those on the surface. There was nowhere to escape. As the celestial event reached its peak, the city's transformation accelerated. The central observatory mechanism activated fully, channeling energy from the black sun into the structures around them. Crew members began experiencing more dramatic physical changes: elongated limbs, increased cranial pressure, heightened sensory perception. Thomas was the first to fully transform. One morning, they found him standing motionless by the camp perimeter, staring at the black sun. When he turned to face them, his eyes had changed, larger, with vertical pupils that dilated in the dim light. "I understand now," he said, but his voice had acquired harmonic overtones that made the air vibrate. "We are the bridge, the final connection." Maya attempted to sedate him, but he moved with impossible speed, avoiding the injection. "Your concern is unnecessary, healer. The transition is not painful, merely expansive." They confined him to a secure habitat, but by nightfall 2 more crew members, Naomi and one of the security officers, showed similar changes. Their skin developed a faint luminescence, and they spoke of remembering a home they had never known. In a moment of clarity, cut through by terror, Eliza established a mind link with the surviving crew members, a connection made possible by their altered neural patterns. Through this shared consciousness, the truth emerged in full. Their expedition hadn't been random. Earth governments had known about the Watchers for decades, had decoded their invitation, and had sent the mission as part of a deal struck centuries earlier. Human vessels in exchange for the Watchers' technology. "We were sacrifices," Richard whispered, his mind already half consumed by the alien consciousness attempting to inhabit him. "They knew what would happen to us." Captain Reeves's thoughts carried bitter confirmation. Not sacrifices, ambassadors. The first wave of a planned integration. They believe the Watchers will elevate humanity, not replace it. "Integration or invasion?" Marcus demanded, his thoughts razor-sharp with anger. "They're taking our bodies without consent." "They believe consent was given when we accepted the mission," Reeves admitted. The classified briefings contained hints of transcendent contact and evolutionary leaps, just enough to satisfy legal requirements without revealing the full truth. As despair threatened to overwhelm them, Eliza discovered a potential escape. The transformation process required precise energy alignment, a perfect synchronization between the city's mechanisms and the Black Sun's position. If they could disrupt this alignment, they might sever the connection long enough to escape. It would require overloading the city's power systems, Lee explained, his thoughts flowing directly into the group consciousness. Someone would need to remain at the central controls while the rest escaped. "And whoever stays would be fully converted," Maya added, their consciousness replaced entirely. The ethical dilemma tore through their shared mind space. Who would stay behind? Who would make the ultimate sacrifice? In the end, it was Dr. Maya Patel who volunteered. "I knew about the arrangement," she admitted, her thoughts tinged with regret. "Not everything, but enough. I was their insurance policy on this mission. Let me atone for my part in this." As the Black Sun reached its zenith directly above the city, the plan was enacted. The remaining crew members fled toward a maintenance airlock Maya had discovered in the outer wall, while she remained at the central observatory controls. From the shared link, they felt a determination as she began the sabotage, redirecting power flows, overloading critical systems, creating a cascade failure that would disrupt the entire network. They also felt the moment the Watcher consciousness fully claimed her, their ancient mind surging through the connection, before Eliza managed to sever the link. The city began to collapse around them as they reached the airlock, sections of wall crumbling, dimensional rifts opening in mid-air, reality itself becoming unstable as the conversion process failed catastrophically. Behind them, the central observatory imploded, taking Maya and the ancient consciousness within her into oblivion. They barely reached the landing craft, a small emergency vehicle intended for short atmospheric hops. As Lee initiated launch procedures, the black sun began to recede, its purpose thwarted by Maya's sacrifice. "It's following a different trajectory," Richard noted, studying the sensor readings as they escaped the planet's gravity. "Not the same path it took to arrive." The journey back to Earth passed in tense silence. The surviving crew members underwent extensive decontamination and quarantine, their bodies and minds examined for lingering effects of their exposure. Government officials debriefed them separately, their stories carefully shaped into a narrative about a failed expedition that found only ruins. 3 months after their return, Eliza noticed the first mark, a faint symbol resembling those from the city, appearing on her wrist during her morning shower. By evening, it had faded, only to reappear elsewhere the next day. The dreams returned next, more vivid than before. In them, she saw the black sun change course, plotting a new trajectory toward Earth. When she tried to warn the authorities, she was politely but firmly reminded of her confidentiality agreements. Her concerns were noted, she was told. The matter was being monitored. Monitored or anticipated, she asked the government official assigned to her case, a bland-faced man named Daniels who visited her university office unannounced. "The phenomenon is hundreds of light years away, Dr. Wright," he assured her. "Even if it were moving toward our system, which our astronomers dispute, it would take millennia to reach us." "Unless something is helping it," Eliza countered. "Unless the Watchers are guiding it somehow." Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes changed. "Have you been experiencing any unusual symptoms since your return? Hallucinations? Unusual dreams?" "Nothing beyond the expected psychological effects of the mission," she lied smoothly. After he left, she checked her private email. An encrypted message from Lee waited in her secure folder. "They're watching us all," it read. "The government has established a new research division devoted to translumin phenomena. Thomas was recruited. Haven't heard from him since. We need to meet." 6 months after their return, Eliza arranged a meeting with the remaining crew members. Lee and Richard arrived, both showing signs of the same transformation. Occasional marks, vivid dreams, moments of connection to a shared consciousness. "They're still inside us," Richard whispered, glancing nervously around the quiet cafe where they'd met. "Not like before, not taking over. It's more subtle." "They're watching," Lee agreed, "learning, waiting." "For what?" Eliza asked, though she already knew the answer. "For enough of us to complete the bridge," Richard explained. "The black sun failed to bring them through en masse, but they found another way, slower, more gradual." "Through us," Eliza concluded. "The perfect Trojan horse." Lee nodded. "I've detected quantum entanglement patterns in our brain tissue. Impossible by current physics. We're connected to something vast, something still in that other dimension." "Have you tried to make direct contact?" Eliza asked. Richard's eyes widened. "That would be insanely dangerous. The last time Thomas interfaced directly." "He survived," Eliza pointed out, "and gained understanding." "Before being recruited by shadowy government agencies," Lee reminded her, "which suggests they're actively pursuing this connection," Eliza said. "If we don't understand what's happening to us, we're just passive vectors. I need to know what they want. What they truly want." That night, in her apartment, Eliza prepared herself for an experiment. Using techniques she'd learned from Naomi during their mission, she arranged symbols from the city in a specific pattern on her floor. The marks on her skin tingled in response, rearranging themselves to match the configuration. She sat cross-legged in the center of the pattern and closed her eyes, focusing her mind as she had when establishing the link with her crew members. But instead of reaching outward, she turned her attention inward, toward the presence she could feel lurking beneath her thoughts. "I know you're there," she projected. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a sensation of falling overwhelmed her, and she found herself in a vast, empty space. Not darkness, but an absence more fundamental than mere lack of light. And she wasn't alone. They surrounded her, tall, elegant forms, composed of shifting geometries rather than solid matter. The Watchers, or what they had become during their millennia in the between space. "You seek understanding," came the thought. Not a voice, but a direct impression in her mind. "This pleases us." "What do you want from humanity?" Eliza demanded. "Symbiosis, continuation. You fear replacement, but we offer elevation." Images flooded her mind, visions of human history, but from an outside perspective showing subtle influences throughout the centuries. Ancient monuments aligned with stellar phenomena. Breakthrough scientific concepts arriving in dreams. The Watchers had been guiding human development for thousands of years, preparing Earth for their eventual return. "Why?" she asked. "Isolation is death," came the response. "We evolved beyond physical form but lost something essential. Connection, sensation, the joy of embodied existence. So you want our bodies? We want partnership, shared existence. Your species reaches for the stars but remains blind to dimensions beyond physical space. We offer the knowledge of 1,000,000 years of evolution. Together, we become more than either could be alone." And the black sun? A natural phenomenon we learn to use, a door between states of existence. It comes to your world now, but slowly. Time for preparation, time for understanding. And if we refuse, sadness permeated the mental connection. Then we fade. Our consciousness disperses, and humanity remains bound to a single dimension, a single form of existence, a tragedy for both our kinds. Eliza felt the sincerity in the communication, but also something withheld, depths of alien thought too complex for human comprehension. They weren't lying, but neither were they revealing everything. "I need time," she told them. "We all do." "Time grows short," they responded. "Others seek us for different purposes. The power, not the partnership. They would use us as weapons, not as guides." As the connection began to fade, one final impression reached her. Find the others. Complete the circle, before those who fear us destroy what we could become together. She returned to consciousness, gasping, her body drenched in sweat. The symbols on the floor had burned themselves into the wood, still glowing faintly with residual energy. On her skin, the marks had multiplied, covering her arms in intricate patterns that pulsed with her heartbeat. In her bathroom mirror, her reflection showed subtle changes. Her eyes slightly larger, her features more refined. For a moment, just the briefest instant, her reflection smiled differently than she did, its eyes holding an ancient intelligence. "Partnership," she whispered, uncertain whether the word came from her mind or theirs. She turned away, moving to her small balcony, where she could see the night sky. Through her amateur telescope, recently purchased and aimed at coordinates she'd calculated obsessively, she could just make out a tiny black disk against the stars. The black sun, now visible from Earth, much closer than its natural trajectory should allow. Her phone rang. Lee, his voice urgent. "They've taken Richard. Government agents at his apartment an hour ago." "We need to find the others," Eliza said, the Watcher's warning fresh in her mind. "All the survivors from our mission, and anyone else experiencing the changes. For what purpose? To complete the circle, before it's too late." She ended the call and looked back at the telescope. The black sun seemed to pulse, as if acknowledging her decision. Partnership or invasion? Evolution or submission? The line between them might be thinner than humanity wanted to admit. Whatever the truth, the Watchers were coming, and Eliza Wright, once a scientist seeking knowledge of alien civilizations, now found herself the unlikely ambassador of humanity's strangest first contact. The black sun was rising, and with it, a new chapter in human existence, whether they were ready or not. Over the next month, Eliza and Lee worked to locate other affected individuals. It proved more difficult than anticipated. The government had moved quickly to isolate known exposure cases, and civilians experiencing symptoms were either in hiding or had been quietly removed from public view. They established a secure communication network using encryption protocols based on the Watcher's mathematical systems, codes that shifted constantly according to astronomical alignments, making them nearly impossible to break with conventional methods. "They're calling it transcendence syndrome," Lee reported during one of their clandestine meetings. "Official policy is containment and study. Unofficial policy." He trailed off. "Weaponization," Eliza finished. "They want to harness the connection without understanding it." "Exactly. The military applications of interdimensional intelligence are too tempting to ignore." Through their growing network, they discovered dozens of affected individuals worldwide, people who had never been to Kepler 438b, but had experienced the dreams, the marks, the gradual changes. The Watcher's influence was spreading, transmitted through unknown means. "It's accelerating," noted Dr. Imani Okoro, an astrophysicist who had joined their group after experiencing vivid dreams of the city. "The black sun is now detectable by our most sensitive instruments, though official channels are suppressing the data." "How long?" Eliza asked. "At current velocity, 18 months until it reaches our system, but the velocity keeps increasing in ways that defy known physics." During this time, Eliza's transformation progressed more rapidly than the others. The marks became permanent, forming intricate patterns across her skin that she concealed beneath long sleeves and high collars. Her sensory perception expanded dramatically. She could perceive wavelengths beyond the normal human spectrum, hear frequencies previously inaudible. Most significantly, her connection to the Watchers strengthened. They communicated regularly now, sharing knowledge and memories that expanded her understanding of both their civilization and the true nature of the universe. "Reality is layered," they explained, showing her models of existence that made human physics seem like a child's drawing. "What you perceive as separate dimensions are merely facets of a single, interconnected whole." The knowledge was intoxicating but also frightening. She found herself thinking in patterns that weren't entirely human, seeing connections that others missed. Was this partnership or gradual replacement? Sometimes she wasn't sure where Eliza Wright ended and the Watcher consciousness began. 9 months after their return, they received an unexpected communication from Thomas. His message was brief but urgent. "Government facility, Nevada desert. Project Lighthouse. They're building a receiver for the black sun. They don't understand what they're doing. Help me." "It's obviously a trap," Lee argued when Eliza proposed a rescue mission. "Thomas was the first to transform completely." "Which means he has the strongest connection to the Watchers," Eliza countered. "And if the government is attempting to create their own receiver for the black sun..." "Catastrophe," Dr. Okoro finished. "The energy would be uncontainable without proper stabilization protocols." Against significant opposition from their growing network, Eliza and a small team infiltrated the facility Thomas had identified. What they found exceeded their worst fears. A massive complex built around technology, reverse-engineered from artifacts smuggled back from Kepler 438b. At its center stood a partial recreation of the observatory mechanism, crudely adapted to Earth materials and power systems. "They can't possibly control this," Lee whispered as they observed from a maintenance tunnel. "The dimensional bleed alone would destroy everything within 50 kilometers." They found Thomas in a secure laboratory, his transformation now so complete he barely resembled a human. His elongated form was connected to multiple monitoring devices, his expanded cranium housing a brain that had reorganized itself into patterns matching the preserved specimens from the alien city. "You came," he said when they entered, his voice a harmony of tones that made the air vibrate. "They think they control me, but I've been waiting for you." "What are they trying to do, Thomas?" Eliza asked. "Create their own doorway, capture the Watchers as they attempt transit. They believe they can selectively filter which aspects of the other dimension are allowed through." "That's insane," Lee hissed. "The energies involved would tear reality apart at the seams," Thomas finished. "I've tried to explain, but they see only weapons and power. They believe they can control what comes through." "We need to destroy this facility," Eliza decided. Thomas shook his head, the movement unnaturally fluid. "No, we need to repurpose it. The circle must be completed before the Black Sun arrives. This receiver can be recalibrated to serve as a proper transition point." "For what purpose?" Lee demanded. "To welcome the Watchers properly," Thomas replied. "To ensure the merger of our species happens in harmony, not chaos." The choice before them was stark: destroy the facility and potentially delay the Watchers' arrival, or take control and facilitate a managed transition. After heated debate among their small team, they chose the latter path. With Thomas's guidance, they began the dangerous process of recalibrating the government's equipment. Word of their actions spread through their network, drawing more of the affected to the facility. As they worked, the Black Sun's approach accelerated further, now visible to conventional telescopes as a dark anomaly moving through the outer solar system. Governments worldwide issued conflicting statements, denials, warnings of astronomical phenomena requiring no public concern, preparations for previously scheduled emergency drills. But as the Black Sun grew larger in the sky, panic became inevitable. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Scientists demanded explanations. Military forces worldwide went on high alert. 18 months after the Kepler 438b expedition, the Black Sun entered Earth orbit. By then, the facility in Nevada had been transformed. No longer a crude attempt to capture alien power, but a precisely calibrated gateway designed to facilitate controlled transition between dimensions. Eliza, now more Watcher than human in her perception though still human in form, took her position at the central controls. Around her stood dozens of similarly affected individuals, their minds linked in a complex network modelled after the city's original design. "Are we doing the right thing?" Lee asked in their final private moment before activation. Despite his own significant transformation, he had maintained more of his humanity than most. "I don't know," Eliza admitted, "but I believe it's better than the alternatives. Uncontrolled incursion, government weaponization. At least this way, we have a voice in what happens next. If we still have voices of our own when it's over." As the Black Sun reached its zenith over the facility, they activated the recalibrated systems. Energy cascaded through the structure, creating a controlled dimensional aperture at its center, a doorway between worlds. The Watchers began to come through, not as invaders, seizing bodies, but as symbiotes offering partnership. Each human in the facility felt the gentle touch of an ancient consciousness against their own, a request rather than a demand. "May we join?" came the thought, a direct impression in the mind. "May we share?" Some refused and were respected in their choice. Most accepted, experiencing an expansion of awareness that transcended human limitations while maintaining human identity. A true symbiosis, neither fully Watcher nor fully human, but something new. Outside the facility, the world watched in awe and terror as the Black Sun manifested globally, visible from every point on Earth simultaneously, defying conventional physics. Time itself seemed to slow as the dimensional boundaries thinned worldwide. In her final moments of purely human consciousness, Eliza broadcast a message to humanity, an explanation, a warning, an invitation. We stand at the threshold of transformation. What approaches is not an ending, but a beginning. The beings we called the Watchers offer us partnership in a universe vaster than we have imagined. The choice to accept or refuse belongs to each individual. This is not conquest. This is convergence. As the message concluded, the black sun reached full manifestation. The facility's systems aligned perfectly with the cosmic phenomenon, creating not the catastrophe the government had feared, but a controlled expansion of human consciousness across the planet. For those who accepted the partnership, reality expanded beyond the limits of single-dimensional existence. For those who refused, life continued largely unchanged, though, in a world increasingly filled with wonders, they could observe but never fully comprehend. A year later, Eliza stood on the summit of what had once been the secret facility, now transformed into the first of many convergence centers worldwide. Her form still appeared human, though the patterns on her skin now glowed with their own inner light, and her eyes reflected stars no human telescope could see. Beside her stood Lee, similarly transformed yet still recognizably himself. Was it worth it? He asked, a question he had posed many times during their journey. Look, she replied, gesturing toward the horizon where a new city was taking shape. Structures of impossible beauty, combining human aesthetics with Watcher knowledge, neither conquest nor submission. Creation. Above them, the black sun remained in orbit around Earth. No longer a threat, but a doorway to dimensions beyond human comprehension. Through it came knowledge, art, science beyond anything humanity could have developed alone. Through it, human consciousness began to explore realms previously inaccessible. Not all embraced the change. Many remained purely human by choice, watching the transformed with mixtures of fear, awe, and resentment. Nations struggled to adapt laws and societies to the new reality of multiple states of existence. There will be conflicts, Lee noted. Those who fear change always fight hardest against it. And those who embrace it too blindly risk losing themselves, Eliza countered. Balance is our responsibility, preserving humanity while expanding beyond its limitations. As night fell, the stars emerged, but not as humans had ever seen them. New patterns revealed themselves, connections previously invisible. The universe as seen through combined human and Watcher perception was infinitely richer, infinitely stranger, infinitely more wondrous. Eliza raised her hand toward the sky, patterns on her skin resonating with distant constellations. Within her mind, the ancient consciousness that shared her form whispered of worlds yet unexplored, civilizations beyond the black sun, adventures awaiting a species newly born from the convergence of two evolutionary paths. The black sun had risen, and with it a new dawn for both humanity and the Watchers, neither species as they had been, but something entirely new. Standing at the boundary between worlds, Eliza welcomed the endless possibilities of a universe suddenly, wonderfully expanded beyond imagination. On a distant world circling a star unknown to human astronomy, another city stands, its black spires reaching toward unfamiliar constellations. Within its central observatory, a new mechanism takes shape, crafted by hands both human and other. A child approaches, her skin bearing luminous patterns, her eyes reflecting galaxies. Is this where it began? She asks, her voice carrying harmonics no purely human vocal cords could produce. One beginning among many, answers her guide, once Dr. Eliza Wright. Now something more complex. The universe is full of beginnings. The child touches the observatory mechanism, her mind instantly connecting with its purpose. Another door? Yes, to reach the next layer of reality. And what waits there? Eliza smiles, the expression both human and not. That, she says, is what we are going to find out. Above them a new star grows dark, its light bending inward rather than outward. Another black sun rises, another threshold awaits. The circle continues, unbroken, evolution unending.